What's going on, guys? My name is Taylor Oglesville and welcome back to another TaylorMade Creations video. In today's video I'm going to show you how to build this farm style table. I got the design from Shanty to Chic.com, and they have a lot of awesome stuff on their website. A lot of free plans, really easy to follow. So I'll put a link to these plans in the description below. But the tabletop turned out great and the legs look awesome, and I'm really happy with how the whole project turned out. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the build.
So I didn't build this table exactly how Shanty to Chic explained how to do it in the plans. Kind of changed a few things for my preferences, but I'll let you know throughout this video when I changed a step. But as of right here, all I did was cut all the pieces out for the legs to go ahead and get started on that. One thing that I did differently from the plans was notch the 4x4s where the legs were going to meet. In the plans it called for 4 different boards being connected, but if you notch them you have 3 different boards and it'd be a lot more secure connection. I'm so glad that I built the Nick Ferry table saw sled. Makes it a lot easier to do these kind of things and also a lot more safer. After I notched all the 4x4s, I went ahead and used the table saw sled again to cut 6 3.5 by 3.5 inch squares in order to put on the bottom of the legs for the table to sit on. Next, I cut a 45-degree cut on the end of each of the legs, and this just gives it more of a decor appeal. Since I decided to notch the 4x4s, I needed to go ahead and prep it for when I decided to put them all together, so I used a 3/4 inch Forstner bit in order to get ready for the 6-inch lag screws that I had. It was time to finally put it together, so I put the 2 center posts upside down on the ground, and then I put glue and then laid the center 4x4 across the top so I could go ahead and lay the other 2 4x4s across. I just love that feeling in woodworking when you get 2 pieces of wood to fit perfectly together. Now that we had a good laugh, I started prepping the joint for the 6-inch lag screws. For the lag screws, I went with Spax T30 1/4 by 6-inch lag screws. I love the washer head on them and it really cinches the connection really well, and I'll put a link to those in the description below. Next I put glue on the bottom side of each end of the leg, and then put the 3.5 by 3.5 inch square for the table to sit on, and then I cinched it up with some brad nails. Next I drilled 2 pocket holes in 2 of the 2x4s that I had cut for the legs. Now I could have started assembling the top part of the legs, so I put some glue down, put the 2x4 across, and cinched it with 3-inch wood screws. Now I was able to attach the piece that I drew the pocket holes in. Next I drilled 4 number 6 countersink holes in all 12 of the 45-degree 2x4s. The Shanty to Chic plans call for you to stain everything at the end, but it'd be a lot easier to sand and stain with all the pieces apart because of all the sharp angles, and it'd be hard to get your sander in there. So I decided to do it this way, which ended up working out very well for me. Now that the legs were stained, I was able to assemble the angled pieces. I left the front side of the angled pieces without stain because I knew I was going to have to wood putty them and sand them later. After I assembled all the angled pieces, I went ahead and wood puttied all the screw holes. I wanted it to have plenty of time to dry before I sanded. Next I was able to assemble the second and third layer of the legs, and this went pretty quickly and easily, and then I was able to stain them right after. The last step on the legs was to put the felt pads on the bottom of the legs, and this just prevents the hardwood floor from getting scratched, and it's a lot easier to move the table around. It was finally time to start working on the tabletop. So the first thing I did was rip the 3 2x4s that were going to be the outer edge of the table. And I wanted it to have a nice clean corner because I didn't want any salt or anything to start building up into that gap if it had a rounded edge. Next, I cut all of the 1x6s to the correct length so I could get them prepped for assembly. Now that all the 1x6s were at their correct length, I made sure to alternate grain up versus grain down, because if all your grain is up or down, the table will begin to bow. Next, I marked every 12 inches on the underside of the table, and that's just where the pocket holes were going to go. Now that the boards were marked, I took out my Kreg jig and drilled all the pocket holes on the boards. Next, I began assembling all of the boards together. So I used my Kreg clamp in order to make sure that the boards were flush. Then I used my trigger clamp to make sure the boards didn't separate when I cinched the screw in. And I repeated this process for each screw. The Shanty to Chic plans don't call for a header board, but I love the way tables look when you put a header board on them. So I cut them to size, put some pocket holes in it, and cinched it to each end. Next, I could start assembling the 2x4 along the outer edge of the table. So I cut a 45-degree angle in it and started attaching it with the Kreg screws. The Shanty to Chic plans don't call for this, but I thought with a board going through the middle, you could add extra support and keep from any bowing from happening. Now that the table assembly was complete, I took out my router and put a 1/8 roundover bit in and went around the entire outer edge of the table. Next, it was time for me to start sanding the tabletop, so I sanded it with 150 grit and then finished it off with 220 grit to get it nice and ready to accept the stain. Next, it was time for stain, so I went with my usual favorite, which was the Minwax Dark Walnut. The Shanty to Chic plans don't call for this, but I used an angle bracket in the corners just to ensure more stability. I just had to show off how great my corner came out. Damn, that looks good. It was finally time for the last few steps of the project, and that was to apply the Minwax polyacrylic finish and to stamp my logo into the furniture. Damn, that's sexy.
I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. The project was really fun and the plans from Shanty to Chic were really easy to follow, and the project turned out great. It looks awesome in my house, so I couldn't be more pleased. But if you aren't already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave me a comment below. And if you like any of the tools or materials I'm using, I'll put links to those in the description below. But other than that, until next time.